What is halfway between a 1x1 and a 3x3? Of course, it's just a 2x2. Now, what's halfway between a 1x1 and a 2x2? I suppose it would be something called a 1.5x1.5, but what would such thing even look like? Today, I want to answer that question and break out of the old boring world of integer numbers of layers on cubes, and instead make the world's first Rubik's Cube with a fractional number of layers. But if we really want to make a 1.5x1.5, the first step is to go back to that original question and brainstorm what the heck it would even look like. Here's what I'm thinking. If a 2x2 has 2 full layers on each axis, then a 1.5x1.5 would have 1.5 layers. So basically it would just be like a 2x2, except one of the layers on each axis would be chopped down to half the size. So now how do we make this puzzle a reality? Well, you might think that the easiest way is to do exactly what I just said, take a normal size 2x2 and then chop down the layers to make them half sized, but that is not the best way to do this. For one thing, once you started chopping down into those pieces, you'd end up hitting these white inner pieces, you'd probably even hit that screw right there, and the puzzle would just fall apart. And even if you could find, say, a different 2x2 with enough clearance inside to let you make those cuts, now you'd be left with these big gaping holes in all the pieces that you'd have to fill in, sand down, make them look nice. It would just be a pain and a lot of work. Instead, my go-to method for 2x2 mods, instead of starting with a big cube and cutting down, is actually starting with a little cube and working up. I've used this method in the past to make everything from the lightest and the heaviest 2x2s to some fun shape mods to whatever the heck these things are. And you can see the benefit is that the mechanism inside is so small that you can make the pieces look like pretty much whatever you want. And the best part is you don't have to physically build up the pieces into the shapes you want using traditional modding. You can instead just design the shapes on a computer, 3D print them out, and glue them on as extensions onto the mini cube. So I went ahead and designed the 4 types of pieces that I think we'll need to make the 1.5x1.5 work. And then I went and 3D printed them in the exact quantities that we need for each type of piece. And here's the result. As you can see, there's 8 different pieces in 4 different shapes. So let's go ahead and pop these off of here. So now we can visualize how these pieces will end up looking on the final cube. As you can see, there's 2 main sizes of pieces. There's the little half ones that are basically the same size as a single cubie on the mini one. And there's the big ones that are basically the same size as a normal 2x2 piece. But interestingly, most of the pieces are actually somewhere in between. So we have 3 pieces that are actually only sticking out in one axis like this. And then we have 3 more pieces that are sticking out in 2 different axes. And you can kind of start to imagine what this final cube will end up looking like. I will say, even though I've made a lot of 2x2 extensions before, this is my first time trying out the fit of these ones in particular. And I think they look great. They definitely fit just like I wanted them to. And the reason I decided to add these little thin extensions on even the smaller half pieces is just so that we have a consistent finish across the entire puzzle. You can imagine it would get a little bit messier if we had parts of the pieces 3D printed and parts of the pieces still using the original plastic. So I just decided to make everything consistent and all 3D printed. So now that we have our extensions in hand and we know they fit great, all that's really left to do is to remove the stickers from our original 2x2, glue those extensions on, and then add some stickers, which might actually prove to be the most time-consuming part. I think I can make it easier though by cutting down an existing set of stickers to the sizes that we need, but we'll see how it goes. For now, it's time to go ahead and start the time lapse. So let's just answer the question once and for all. What comes between a 1x1 and a 2x2? Why? The 1.5x1.5. Obviously that makes no sense mathematically, it really is just a shape mod of a 2x2, but hey, we have 1.5 layers on every axis. I wasn't really sure how this was gonna look. I figured it would be kind of like a mirror cube, but with just 2 consistent sizes of pieces rather than all 6, and I guess that kind of is what it turned out like. I really love, especially at this angle, that it really looks like you took a normal 2x2 and then just chopped all the back layers in half. I think the pieces themselves turned out really nice. Of course, you always have that 3D printed texture under the stickers, which is a little bit ugly, but I don't think it detracts from it too much. I think the stickers also turned out really nice. They were pretty easy to make, and the only weird part is these big curves where you'd normally have the big hole in a normal 2x2, whereas this one obviously doesn't have as much corner cutting. But that just kind of adds to the 2x2-esque look of it. Again, the fit of the pieces is also really nice. They're a little bit wobbly, especially these big ones, but I think that's just because of the nature of extending the pieces of a mini 2x2. And in terms of turning, well, it's about what you'd expect from a normal 3D printed puzzle. Pretty smooth, a little bit catchy in places, but not too bad. But the great part about turning it isn't what it feels like, but what it looks like. Even after just doing a single turn there, you can see it already looks very wonky. Now, if we go ahead and extend that out to a checkerboard pattern, well, this might be one of my favorite 2x2 checkerboard patterns yet. It looks so abstract, so random, yet also so nice and ordered. It's beautiful. But now let's go ahead and see how that translates to just scrambling up the puzzle. Again, kind of reminiscent of a mirror cube, but kind of different because you only have two sizes of pieces. Now the fun thing is, if you solve this using a method like Ortega, you'll make a side first, like this green one here, but it's not actually a square. It's just this weird random shape, but then eventually it'll turn back into a square once we do the last step. So let's go ahead and do this really annoying OLL here, and there we go. And then PBL recognition is a little bit weird. I guess we just have a T-perm here, so let's do that real quick. And there we go. Obviously, it's not any more difficult to solve than a normal 2x2 because you have all the same normal stickers on it. There's no orienting pieces incorrectly or anything like that. I think the only added difficulty comes from being able to hold the puzzle when it turns into all these weird shapes. So yeah, this thing is definitely a fun, unique little puzzle to fill in this obvious gap in my collection. But in all seriousness, this has already gotten me thinking of some fun mods you could do in the future. What about a 3x3 where you had a half layer, full layer, and then layer and a half right here. So kind of like a mirror cube, except consistent on every axis. I think that would not only look incredible, but also make for some mind-bogglingly good patterns. But anyway, we'll leave that for another time. Let me know what you think of the 1.5 by 1.5. I really hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.